Hello and welcome to Talking Books. I'm Jill de Villiers. As the world emerges from the COVID-19 pandemic and with the COP27 climate summit behind us, we look ahead at the 2030 deadline for Sustainable Development Goals, especially in the African context. Are we on track to meet these goals now that the world looks very different from what it did like way back in 2015 when these 17 goals were conceptualized? My guest today is Professor Tshilidzi Marwala to discuss his latest book, Heal Our World, Securing a Sustainable Future. Professor Marwala is the outgoing Vice-Chancellor at the University of Johannesburg, who will step into his new position as the Rector of the United Nations University in Tokyo, Japan, in March next year. Professor Marwala, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Jill, for inviting me to come and have this very important conversation as I ease out of the University of Johannesburg and I enter an international space, the United Nations based in Tokyo, where we would be able to deal with issues of global peace, global well-being, and global prosperity. So thank you very much for inviting me.
So I hope as well that you will be able to push these goals as well from there as you go forward.
My tenure as the rector of the United Nations University actually coincides with the last mile of Sustainable Development Goal 2025 to 2030 strategy of the United Nations University will be my responsibility, and I intend to fulfill it with distinction.
Now, Professor, part one of the book is dedicated to chapters on these 17 SDGs, and part two of the book encompasses several chapters under the theme In Pursuit of an Appropriate Developmental Path. So I'd like to start with SDG 9, if you don't mind, Industry, Innovation and Infrastructure. This is very much a part of our world today is the Russia-Ukraine war. Wars are devastating on so many scales, both human and economic. Now, against this backdrop, can you explain how the industry, innovation, infrastructure can limit political domination and exploitation and help the world progress?
One thing that we need to understand is that technology, industry, technology, and so on and so forth are very, very important parts of development. They can also be negative because industry can be used to harm people, as we witnessed during the Second World War. And what we ought to do today is to make sure that we use technology responsibly. We use industry responsibly. We limit the proliferation of industries of death. These are armament factories and so on and so forth, and we concentrate or refocus our production to industries of care, of well-being, of health, of peace. And of course, at the heart of industrialization is innovation. Innovation is simply, if I were to define it, is simply a way of touching into our creative spaces so that we can produce goods and services that are unique, but that serve the purpose with distinction. And when we talk about SDG 9, we contextualize it to the African continent. We would all agree that with the exceptions of few countries in Africa, including South Africa, the African continent is not industrialized. And the result of that, the result of not industrialization and industrializing is that we have not been able to deal with essential issues such as a reduction of poverty, which is SDG 1, issues of zero hunger, which is SDG 2, issues of health and well-being, education education for all, which is SDG 3 and SDG 4. So it is quite crucial that embedded in all these SDGs, industrialization, innovation, those are the core. Those are the core goals that we need to advance.
So, Professor, I'd like to move on to SDG 8 now as well, because it's also very relevant to us. Decent work and economic growth. Here in South Africa, this very year, in fact, we clocked the highest unemployment rate in a decade, and the youth is particularly impacted by this. Could you share your thoughts on work and economic growth from this year's statistics in South Africa?
Well, I mean, the statistics in South Africa are actually quite horrible. 34% of our people, and this is technical unemployment, do not have jobs. And of course, we know technical unemployment does not include people who have already given up. If we include people who have given up, we are close to 50% of our productive, the people at the most productive times in their lives out of employment. And I also would like to add that this is one SDG that the University of Johannesburg in the Times Higher Education University rankings actually does well. In fact, in 2021, according to the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, the University of Johannesburg was ranked first in the world, not just in the African continent, but in the world, in our research that advances decent work and economic growth. Now, where lies the crux of the matter? The crux of the matter when it comes to employment is that we are no longer competitive. We have lost our competitive edge. Why have we lost our competitive edge? Because we have not invested in new ways of production. If you go to production, you go to Asia, and you go to many parts of the world where they are producing goods and services, you will realize that there has been a general trend of automating production. And of course, it has an unintended consequences of increasing unemployment, but it creates capital that can be used to take care of people. So we need to do to make our economy competitive. How do we do that? Education. The people who come out of the education system must be skilled enough to be able to handle production in our era. Secondly, government must incentivize industries, whether it is tax breaks, whether it is access to research grants, so that they can be able to create the next generation of products and goods and services that they produce. Whatever those incentives should be, we should actually do them. And I think we'll be able to deal with these issues. But we are also living in an era of the fourth industrial revolution, where many jobs are simply going to disappear. Many jobs are going to change, and new jobs are going to emerge. And we need to be ready as South Africa.
Well, just to end this discussion here for the moment, is you quote Karl Marx, observing that people's needs, aspirations, and goals can be fulfilled mainly through material gains rather than ideology, work rather than ideas. Just what are your thoughts on materialism versus idealism and the way forward?
I think uncontrolled materialism is obviously dangerous. I think SDG, I think it's SDG 12, puts it very well. Responsible consumption and production is the culture that we need to adopt. We can't go and spend as if it is the end of the world. We have to take care of people who do not have, who need, whether it is shelter, whether it is food. Those who can't must be taken care of. So my philosophy is best encapsulated by SDG 12, responsible consumption and production.
Now, Professor, we have about 3 minutes left that we can chat, and I thought maybe we can chat a little bit about Goal 7 as well, which is affordable and clean energy, which is a really an important topic at the moment. We've just come out of COP27, and we're in South Africa with its coal-based power, and the grid is now in the worst period of load shedding we have ever experienced. How possible is a just transition for us?
Well, as you can see, I just experienced load shedding as you were speaking about this, but my generator has come. No, I think it's very important that we have to have a just transition, and the just transition must be done responsibly so that we do not create problems while we are trying to solve problems. And I think the technological developments, whether it is in other forms of energy, here at the University of Johannesburg, for example, 15% of our power comes from solar. We need to put it as part of our energy mix. So it's very, very important that we secure energy, and that energy must also be sustainable. Now, coming back to South Africa's case, we have 193 years of coal stockpiles, which basically means we can be able to use coal for the next 193 years. And the just transition is simply going to make sure that we do not use coal for the next 193 years. We can't afford to use coal. The world cannot afford to use coal for the next 193 years. So we need to invest in other ways of generating energy. We need to invest in the use of energy quite responsibly. We cannot be pointing fingers if we leave all our lights on when we come to work. So as individuals, we also must use energy quite responsibly. But I think going forward, the clean energy is a non-negotiable.
Indeed. So we have to find a way in between the fossil fuels and the clean energy and work towards a brighter future. Professor, your book is, I haven't even got to the second part of your book where you have all of these essays. I would have wanted to ask you about that, but we have come to the end of our time. I would really recommend this book for a delve into the situation today around SDGs and the way forward. Thank you so much for talking to us, Professor.
Thank you very much.
My guest is Professor Tshilidzi Marwala, the outgoing Vice-Chancellor at the University of Johannesburg and the incoming Rector of the United Nations University in Tokyo, Japan. The book is called Heal Our World, Securing a Sustainable Future. Thank you so much for watching. See you soon.